Welcome back, and we will continue our conversation about media and diversity. We have an in-studio guest, Solomon Jones, radio host from WURD. Hello. In the studio, we have Mr. Solomon Jones, award-winning columnist, radio host, and the author of Pipe Dream. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I have no complaints at all.
Good.
But today we want to start off with talking about how important is it to have diversity in media?
It is extremely important because I think that people get their impressions of communities from media.
Right.
And there's a whole history behind that around segregation and people living in separate communities and living really separate lives. And so what you see in media really informs what you think about other people if you live in a society that has been segregated for as long as America has.
Do you think it's hard for different ethnicities to get into the media circle?
I don't, especially now. I think that with social media, a lot of what's happening now wasn't happening when I came into media 20-some years ago. A lot of the stories are being driven by regular people with cameras and with Twitter handles and with Facebook pages. And I think that's a good thing in some ways. In some ways, it's a bad thing. But that's why you have a mainstream media, people who have been trained as journalists to kind of vet those things. Where it becomes dangerous, I think, is where you begin to demonize those who are telling the truth, who are telling things that you might not necessarily want to believe, but things that are still true.
Now, since you brought that up, demonizing the media, how critical is it to hear it coming from so high up where they're saying the worst people, terrible people, and then say media? What effect is that having on media?
I think that for some people in the media, they're intimidated. But I think it really depends on your motivation for getting into the media. Right. If you got into the media to be famous, then it's about you. It's not about the story. It's not about the people who you're telling the story for. And so that can intimidate you and make you shy away from telling the truth or make you shade the truth in a different way. Right. But I think if you are there to tell stories on behalf of a community or tell stories on behalf of the people, then I think that only spurs you on to tell even more truth. And so it really depends on why you're in it. It depends on what your motivations are, and it depends on who your audience is. And so I've seen some people kind of step back and say, we're going to tell this story in a different way because we don't want to offend anyone. Well, if that's why you're in it, then you're in the wrong business.
I hear that.
It has to be about truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So with the different ways we communicate now, whether it be TV, whether it be social media, do you feel as though with Trump going straight to the people through Twitter and not having that accountability of having that press conference, how do you think that we're really able to hold him accountable since he's kind of controlling everything from the way he's doing his press releases?
I don't. I think that it gives the media the opportunity to do what media is supposed to do. When this country was founded, one of the things they put in the First Amendment was that the freedom of the press shall not be abridged. And so there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of the press, there's freedom of religion. All of those things are literally built into the main law that governs our country. And so the press is important. What the press has to realize is that the press is important. And so as President-elect Trump sends out whatever messages he wants to via Twitter, then it is our job to vet those messages and to tell the truth about them. And so I think that it really gives the media an opportunity to step up. We have to be inventive in terms of the way that we get the truth out. The old models aren't working anymore. Newspapers aren't going to be here anymore soon because the people who read newspapers are dying out. And so that model isn't going to work anymore. It's going to be incumbent upon those who are coming into the industry, I believe, to reshape it in ways that make it as relevant as it can possibly be, even in the face of those like President-elect Trump, who are saying that the media is evil, they're dishonest people. Well, you say that if you don't want the truth to come out. If you have a message that is not necessarily true and you want people to believe that, then you demonize those who are on the other side and trying to tell the truth.
Exactly. And that's the image that a lot of people are getting.
Yeah.
It's like, as long as they're saying what you want to hear, it's all good. But as soon as they say something you don't want to hear, now it's a problem.
Right.
But speaking of vetting, these fake news locations and websites that are coming out, and they're saying that the problem isn't so much that they have fake news outlets, but it's when people who are considered a reliable source shares these, and then a day later they get tapped on the shoulder, oh, you have to delete that. But now the damage is already done. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's dangerous, but I think that it is up to us as individuals to understand that there is fake news, and that it can sometimes look like real news, that they use web addresses where it might say usatoday.com. Well, after .com, it says .co or .net or something else. And so you have to be really cognizant of what you're looking at as a consumer before you share it, because all of us are our own news outlets now. Because if you're a trusted source, like you said, for the people in your circle, and they believe what you tell them. If I post something, then there are thousands of people who are going to believe that story because Solomon posted it. And so it's incumbent upon all of us now to take a second look. If that story is something you haven't seen someplace else, see if you can find it in 2 or 3 other reliable sources, mainstream media sources, where you have fact checkers and lawyers and editors all making sure that the content in those stories are true. The one thing that I really respect, having worked in newspapers, is the fact that they will not print anything if it is a viable news source until they know that it's true. And I respect that. And so we have to know that unless we see it 2 or 3 places, it might not be true.
Right. But people it's really interesting to see people saying, no, it's a fact. And then they're like, no, it's not a fact. So it's really scary how in the media, where the guy is actually going to use a gun to check a location to see if something is real or not. So people are really taking this seriously. So to have people in high places sharing stuff without vetting or fact checking it is so dangerous, and it seems like it's getting worse.
Yeah, I think so. And the story you allude to is the man who went to the pizza parlor, right, in Washington, D.C. to check on this fake news story about a child pornography ring being run out of a pizza shop. Now just think about that for a minute. All right, would they really run it out of a pizza shop? So it's like, you know, if you just use a little bit of common sense, you would know that maybe this isn't true. But there are those who, you know, who take these things seriously, who don't have a lot of other things to do, who don't have a lot of people to kind of check them and say, wait a minute, calm down, sit down, let's talk about this. And so it's dangerous in that way, because people get these fake news stories and they act on them. And thank God nobody was shot when he shot into that pizzeria. But somebody could have been seriously hurt about a story that wasn't even real.
Talk to us about how powerful the media is.
Oh, the media is extremely powerful. My wife likes to watch old movies, and I don't, because invariably there will be somebody black who is portrayed as a slave, who is portrayed as a servant, who is portrayed as stupid, not well spoken. But that is a message through media.
Exactly.
And so when you see that, you say, yeah, well, that's how black people are supposed to be. That's how they're supposed to act. And that is my expectation of them. And so racism, classism, sexism, all of those things are perpetuated through media images and media messages. It is extremely powerful because it can influence the way that you think.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stay tuned. We have more with PhillyCAM, and thank you for tuning in to PhillyCAM Voices. I'm your host, Amanda Johnson.